And a good spiritual morning to you once again. I'm Father Cosmas. Thanks for joining me today for a quick chat and, of course, our morning cup of coffee. And this week we remember and we celebrate the feast day of the Holy Cross. Every year on September 14th on our church calendar, we remember the elevation or the lifting up of the Holy Cross. And so I thought we'd talk about that a little bit for today and an implication for us in our spiritual life. So first, it's a beautiful story, the story of the Holy Cross. And what's happening is St. Helen, St. Constantine and Helen, right? Constantine is the emperor, and this is in the 4th century, around 326 or so. And his mother, St. Eleni or Helen, she is a very pious and faithful Christian, and she wants to find the actual cross of Christ, which has been lost for almost 3 centuries. And so she goes to Jerusalem, she begins searching for it, and they're trying to figure out where to dig. Of course, over the centuries, the pagans have built temples and covered up the holy Christian sites. And so she sees this lone flower, this lone plant growing by itself in an area and realizes that's where she should dig. And it's a basil, sweet basil plant, or basiliko, we call it in Greek. And that's why we use the basil plant when we have our procession and celebration of the cross on the 14th. She digs there. She tells people to dig there. And behold, they find 3 crosses. Now, they don't know which cross is actually Christ. And so there happens to be a funeral procession going by. And so they call over the funeral procession and they place the first cross on top of the person that has passed away. Nothing happens. They place the second cross. Nothing happens. When they place the third cross on top of the dead body, the person comes back to life and is resurrected from the dead. And so they know that is the cross of Christ. Now, people start hearing about this. Crowds start coming and wanting to venerate the cross and, of course, try to get a piece of the cross. And so to allow everyone to be able to sort of see the cross, the patriarch locally, who's Makarios, St. Makarios, actually build a little throne there, and he goes up on the throne. He lifts the cross up. He elevates it. That's where we get the term the elevation or the exaltation, right? The ipsosis, the lifting up of the cross. He lifts it up in all 4 directions and lets the crowd see it so that they can sort of see and venerate the great cross of Christ. And so every year on the 14th, we remember that. So the implication for us in our spiritual life, well, this idea that the cross itself communicates the grace of Christ, right? Now, I know we're talking about the actual cross, but just the idea that the symbol of the cross, that's the symbol of Christianity. And in the sign or in the symbol of the cross, we are communicating the grace of Christ himself. And so that's why in Orthodox Christianity, we make the sign of the cross. When we make the sign of the cross, well, we're blessing something, right? We're blessing something that we're making the sign of the cross over. And we're asking Christ to impart his grace and to bless either that person or that object, whatever it might be. The same way that the grace of Christ is communicated through the actual cross to raise someone from the dead. We're asking Christ to communicate his grace, to give us his grace, to be with us, to meet us there, to encounter us, and to bless us, right? To make us holy, to sanctify us. And so that's why the sign of the cross is so important and so fundamental and basic as a part of our life as Orthodox Christians. But far too often we don't utilize it. Oftentimes we're embarrassed of it. If we're in mixed company, we don't do that, but we shouldn't be embarrassed, and we should be utilizing the cross, the sign of the cross, in order to bless ourselves, in order to ask Christ to make us holy, to be with us, and to meet us. And we should be doing that not just when we're in church around everyone else that's already doing it at the same time. We should be doing it every day. We wake up in the morning, the first thing we should do before our feet hit the floor is we should cross ourselves. Thank God for the gift of a new day. And throughout the day, whenever we can remember Christ, whenever we can offer a prayer, before we eat our meal, thank God that we have food. That's a blessing. Not everybody has food. These are some things that we take for granted in our modern society. But disruptions in the food chain over the past few years have, I think, made people realize, wow, so there is no guarantee that I'm always going to have accessibility to food. There isn't. And so when we have that, we're not hungry, we're not destitute, we're not unhoused, we don't have food insecurity. We should cross ourselves and thank God for that. Throughout the day, whenever we can. It doesn't matter where we are and who we are in front of and who we are around. We shouldn't be embarrassed to witness our faith as Christians and to make the sign of the cross and ask for God's blessing. And if we have young children or grandchildren, we should also make the sign of the cross over them when they go to sleep, when they leave, and we send them off out into the world at the beginning of the day. You're putting them on the school bus or you're driving them to school and they're getting out of the car. You can picture, your yaya, your grandmother, your grandfather back in the old days doing that, making the sign of the cross over as a blessing, asking God to be with that person throughout the day, to watch over them, to protect them, to bless them, and to keep them safe. That's part of our life as Christians, remembering Christ throughout our day-to-day life and calling on Him and asking Him to be with us. It's fundamental, and it's something that we should be doing each and every day. Amen.